Hey, welcome in.
Welcome to the Arrowhead Addict podcast.
We are here coming to you live.
The Kansas City Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl. You only win a Super Bowl 2 times every 5 years, right? Oh! The warm-up act is over. Let's bring in Melissa Etheridge, massive Chiefs fan. Melissa.
Super Bowl champion, 2-time Pro Bowler, and Trent Green. Trent Green, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
And he picked it up! He picked it up! He's gonna
And we'll see you next week. But until then, as always, go Chiefs.
Welcome to a special edition of Wacky Wednesday right here on the Arrowhead Addict channel. Sterling Holmes is out today, so producer Richard and I have a very special guest for you guys. My own father, Dr. John Best, the old Chief, the man, the myth, the legend, the guy that got me into the Chiefs in the first place decades and decades and decades ago, longer than either one of us would like to admit personally. Dad, how you doing?
Just great, Adam. Just great. Glad to be here.
Yeah. And you are like an almanac of Chiefs trivia, Chiefs knowledge. When did you first become a Chiefs fan for our listeners who don't know you?
When they moved to Kansas City in '63, my father came to St. Louis and said, "This is a team we need to start watching." And at that time, the Chiefs were in the AFL and they were on NBC. And the NFL was on CBS. And so we got to watch them. Then we started going over to Kansas City. And then when I moved to Columbia and then ultimately to Kansas City, I became a Chiefs fan. And I was actually there at the opening night of Arrowhead Stadium.
So you are like the original Arrowhead Addict. You were there from the inception.
Yes. In fact, I think you were born the day that the Chiefs beat the Buffalo Bills.
Well, that not a lot has changed because they're still beating the Buffalo Bills, aren't they?
That's true.
They're still doing that. So we've got a lot to talk about today. Crazy week, free agency. We're in the midst of free agency. I think we've kind of hit a lull after that initial explosion that happens in between tampering, which, I mean, why do they even have this tampering period? I mean, everyone's tampering, everyone signs the second it happens. And then free agency actually just started officially not too long ago. So what we're going to do for you guys today is 10 flaming hot questions.
So when you say psychosomatic, you mean like he could start a fire with his thoughts?
This is a fun segment. We're going to go rapid fire style and rip through basically everything that's happened during free agency and all the connected fallout with the help of our old friend, the Countdown-O-Tron 8008. So 3 minutes of clock per question. We got to get in and get out, Dad, with our insights, with our feelings, whether we like or dislike these moves. Let's go ahead and jump in if you're ready.
I'm ready.
Number 1, Trey Smith over Joe Toney. Did the Chiefs pick the right guard?
For the long term, yes, they did. Joe Toney will be 33, I believe, this fall. And Trey Smith was a number 6 pick. He's 25. The age makes such a big difference in a long-term contract. I think Toney was looking for an extension, and we need cap relief. And I think we got $17 million cap relief, which was very variable. And Toney, as long as we had Toney, we could always plug him in at tackle. And it's great when we play the Panthers, but certainly not very good when we play the Eagles.
Yeah, it was great until it wasn't. I mean, it even looked good against the Bills, but when they got against a premier defensive coordinator and a stacked defense, the whole plan fell apart. It wasn't just him. It was who had to play at left guard. We'll certainly miss Joe Toney. I think there's an argument that Joe Toney is the greatest free agent acquisition in Kansas City Chiefs history, because he came in at a time where the offensive line was just ravaged, coming off the Super Bowl 55. And the Chiefs needed a veteran, kind of a rock, an anchor to build upon. And he came in, was as good as advertised, and he mentored Creed Humphrey. He mentored Trey Smith. And in his 4 years in Kansas City, actually, they went to 3 Super Bowls, winning 2 of them. They never missed the AFC Championship. I think Joe Toney is headed to the Ring of Honor, but I agree with you. This is the right move. Brett Veach, if he's going to err, he's going to err on the side of youth. Basically, unless your name is Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, or Patrick Mahomes, and you are a genuine franchise cornerstone, nobody is safe on this roster, especially if you start getting up there in the 20s or the 30s, whatever is old for your group. Trey Smith, do you think he still has room for improvement? Because obviously one of the best run blockers in the league, one of the most physical players in the league, heavily penalized, has some room for improvement as a pass blocker. Where do you stand on his development arc?
I think he's a relatively young player. I think he could still improve. There is talk that they may move him to left guard, and the left guard really has more of a since you run right more than left, he would be pulling, and I think that would be a wise choice. So also he would be able to support Jalen Moore at left tackle. So I think that's a really good idea to move him to the left guard.
Which is kind of crazy how things have flipped around. You had he was sort of the unexperienced apprentice before, and now he's going to be kind of the experience other guys need to lean on this line, Kingsley Suamataia and Jalen Moore.
I agree.
Touchdown, Kansas City.
Now, I have to put out a disclaimer before we get into this next one. You are Mr. Mizzou. We all see the helmet in the background. You went there. You've been rooting for Mizzou longer than probably, or like about as long as you've been rooting for the Chiefs. So just going to throw that out there because, if you went to MU, you think Nick Bolton is Ray Lewis. If you went to KU or KSU, you think he's Ben Neiman, basically. We can't be rational about Nick Bolton. But let's get into number 2. Nick Bolton over Justin Reed. I think that was the calculation. Not they're always going to sign another corner. So Nick Bolton over Justin Reed. Did the Chiefs pick the right defensive leader?
Yes, they did. Nick is he's young. He's 25. He graduated from Mizzou after 3 years.
He's 24, actually.
24, right. Yeah. And he graduated from Mizzou in 3 years. He's extremely bright. I've heard Spags call him the brightest player he's ever had, which is really saying quite a bit. If you ever notice during the game, he'll come and move people around, particularly linemen. He'll move them around the DNs, the linebackers. And Spags says he's the Mahomes of the defense. I think he also comes at a little bit more of a reasonable position, because you can lose a little speed at a linebacker, but not lose your worth. But you lose your speed at a safety, as we all know with Dan Sorensen, it's deadly. And so I think Reed is getting to the age now where he's getting a little long in the tooth, and it's about time for him to go to the Saints, where all good chief defensive safeties wind up.
Yeah, it's, they pay for all the guys that Clark Hunt doesn't want to spend on, it seems like. We have MVS, we have CEH, we have the Honey Badger, Dan Sorensen, Passanio. I'm missing somebody, Willie Gay, right?
Willie Gay. I've got over 50 on my desk. You forgot Rick Henry, Joe Horn, Yasser Durant, Mark Semino, Kyle Turley, Eddie Kennison.
Well, you're going
Ricky Sigler at the New Orleans. Pardon me. Yeah, way back. But if you go to a Saints game, they sing "And the Home of the Ex-Chiefs" instead of the Chiefs.
They might as well. We got Willie Rowe for them, so I guess we're just slowly paying them back. Yes. It's like a mortgage for the home or something. Willie Rowe's as big as a house, so yes. It kind of makes sense. I think they made the right decision. Nick Bolton is an extension of Spags on the field. This is a very complicated, exotic defense where everyone has to be in the right place at the right time in order to fool the other offense and give them headaches. Nick Bolton is the conductor on the field. He orchestrates all that. He is great against the run. He is a downhill thumper. I think his pass coverage, I mean, it's weird because Justin Reed has all the same strengths as Nick Bolton, but also has some coverage deficiencies. But I think Nick Bolton's have been overstated because he's generally in the right place. Probably like if a quarterback drops back, I don't know, 35 times a game, he'll be in the right place 33 times. But he's a little bit, I would say, diagonally or laterally challenged when you get him against supreme athletes. And sometimes that shows up on tape. But I just think he's a great leader for this defense. And he's going to be, they're great at finding safeties and secondary help. It's going to be harder to find another Nick Bolton.
Touchdown, Kansas City.
Number 3, were the Chiefs wise to make a smaller bet at tackle given the circumstances? And just for everyone that doesn't know, on Monday, they signed left tackle Jalen Moore to a 2-year, $30 million contract. He's pretty much locked in. They could maybe get out of it next year if they wanted to take a $10.7 million dead cap hit. He was the backup for Trent Williams, maybe the best left tackle in football still, even at his advanced age, and came in as an injury replacement and looked great this year. And that earned him a contract. The Chiefs decided they didn't want to spend $80 million on Dan Moore, another young option. They couldn't get Ronnie Stanley. So this is what they did. Dad, once again, smaller bet. Is that the right move?
Yeah, it is. Jalen Moore is, he was a 5th round pick in 21. He's 6'4", 311 from Western Michigan, and he's 27. I think he's got longer arms than some of the other people we're looking at. The Moore from that we looked at from Pittsburgh went ultimately to Tennessee, I believe, for $80 million, which is overpaying. And Ronnie at Baltimore, we offered him more than Baltimore, and he took it. I think we offered 60 million over 3 or 4 years, and I think he took 40 million for 2 or 3.
I think it was the same deal, but there were teams that offered him 24 million. The Patriots, maybe the Commanders, and he wanted to stay in Baltimore. I'm actually relieved because Ronnie Stanley can't stay on the field. He missed almost 2 entire seasons, and he miraculously is healthy in a contract year. It's just a little scary. And I think the Chiefs have such a good coach and have such a good quarterback. When you have that pairing, the only thing that's really going to knock you off track is a disaster longer-term signing. Like if you're locked into Dan Moore for 3 or 4 years and he is just unplayable and he's just, just cannibalizing a huge chunk of cap, that really ties a hand behind your back because you have this massive quarterback cap hit. You also still have Chris Jones on the books. So they just don't really have room to make big mistakes. And I think that's a pattern with Brett Veach. He's both playing it safe by doing these smaller deals for vets and by choosing young players over veterans. I think he is kind of doing the right mix of upside and risk mitigation. Do you see it that way?
As a physician, I think, and I've been a team physician before, the left tackle is a very, very precarious position. You're out on an island. A lot of these guys get leg injuries. It's strange enough, but they're very vulnerable. A lot of them are very tall. They're usually 6'5", 6'6". I think
Kansas City.
So yeah, I think, and this doesn't allow us from getting other free agents or like bringing Humphreys back or even getting a 2nd or 3rd round pick that we could fill in as a possible replacement.
Sterling would get on to me for this, but I'm going to give us a little bit more to talk, Richard, before we jump in the next one, because I think my dad here the old Chief has an excellent point. If you make that Dan Moore, Ronnie Stanley bet, then you really can't pick another developmental tackle in the draft. You can't really sign a plan B. This is quasi starter money, but they're not locked into him. So they can't have alternate plans. And when I've thrown out that they might take a developmental tackle, people say, well, why would they keep picking them? Lucas Niang and Wanye Morris and Kingsley Suamataia. Well, Kingsley Suamataia, second rounder, you definitely wanted that guy to hit. But when you're picking third rounders, you need a lot of bites at the apple before one of those guys is going to hit. You can't expect to draft one third rounder at left tackle and for him to be a franchise cornerstone, right? Is that
Lucas Niang was an injured. He had a bad hip in college. He fell to the third round for the Chiefs because of that. Yet he never could get totally well. And that's really true. A lot of these guys that as I talked about, they're lengthy, they're big, they're exposed to a lot more leg whips and other things. They're out on an island, as I mentioned. It's a very precarious position. I think this Jalen Moore does not have a lot of miles on him. And I think, Andy might take this as a project. Andy was an old offensive line coach. He was an offensive line coach at Mizzou, if you all didn't know that. And he really takes a lot of pride in the offensive line. And I think he feels kind of bad with what happened with the BYU project. As you mentioned, I won't mention his name because every time I do, I misspell it or misstate it. Kingsley.
Don't do it. Don't do it to yourself, man. Don't do it. It took a lot of practice to get it perfected. I think the Andy Reid and Andy Heck are under a little pressure, under the microscope a little bit when it comes to the offensive line, because they were really trucking there with Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith. And I think Orlando Brown Jr. went a lot better than Chiefs fans remember it. I would have loved to have Orlando Brown Jr. Back last year. I think he's been the best tackle we've had since Mitchell Schwartz and Eric Fisher. I know the bar is very low, but one thing you could say is drafting these guys, they just weren't the right picks. Another way to put it is the Chiefs have done a poor job of developing these young tackles. I think they need to get it right. I don't want to be back this time next year looking at a new Jalen Moore and saying, having the same conversation, this revolving door at tackle situation, this Groundhog Day situation continuing. And I think that's been the big criticism of this move. So let's hope they got it right. Moving on to number 4, what does the signing of cornerback Christian Fulton mean for the defense? Before I let you dig in there, Dad, Christian Fulton got 2 years, $20 million from the Chiefs, played for the Chargers last year, has been off injured, only 26, former second-round pick. A lot of upside there. How are you feeling about this signing and what it means?
I feel good about it. He was on that LSU national championship team. He's 5'11", 197. He's good against the run, which we need. And I think he moves Trent into the slot receiver corner position, where I think he's probably the best. That's his best position. We didn't have to give up anything to get Christian Fulton. And I think the Chargers, just like our friends up north, the 49ers, are letting too many of their players go and before they're completely exhausted in their abilities. I think he'll be a starter day one.
The thing with him and Jalen Watson is they just got to keep those guys on the field. I don't think Jalen Watson had a bad Super Bowl. He was hurt. Let's see how he comes back. He's also been hurt a little bit. But I think this is more of an indictment of Najee Johnson, of Joshua Williams. They just did not have a CB3, which meant Trent McDuffie had to play outside and Chamari Connor had to play in the slot, which they're kind of both miscast. Now, I think Trent McDuffie is still a top 5, 6, 7, 8 corner outside. He is the best slot corner in the National Football League. I don't think there's any question about that. It makes it a little easier to disguise him blitzing. So he won't play there all the time, but we'll see who's CB2 and who's CB3. I kind of think Fulton, money talks, he's probably going to be CB2 and Watson will be CB3. Some people think the opposite. But what's going to happen is those guys, when there's 3 corners on the field, those guys are going to be on the boundary. And McDuffie's going to be in the slot. You're going to move Shamari Connor back to being a safety with Jaden Hicks and Brian Cook. And I just think that configuration of the safety room fits together. Then kind of the makeshift job they did this year just didn't really work the way they wanted it to, right?
I think they've learned a lot. I think the Super Bowl, just like when they lost to Tampa Bay, they learned a lot from that loss, and that they needed to retool their offensive line. And I think this year, not only did we learn about the offensive line, I think we learned about the offense in general, and also our secondary. We really kind of got beat up by the wide receivers of the Eagles.
Well, I mean, there's no shame in that. They beat up on everybody. I love to have those two guys.
Yeah, I know, Adam. You're in love with Brown. So,
I mean, he's a complete receiver. I mean, guys like him and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson don't grow on trees. I would love just once in the Mahomes era to see him with a guy like that. We did to some extent with Tyreek Hill.
You wonder why Tennessee.
Go ahead.
You wonder why Tennessee is up getting the first round pick. They make bad decisions. They should have never traded A.J. Brown for a first round pick and then picked the receiver from Arkansas.
Treylon Burks, yeah. And they kind of gave a lot of money to Ryan Tannehill. And in retrospect, you're looking at Ryan Tannehill and Arthur Smith, who got a head coaching job, and you're like, well, you're handing off to Derrick Henry and doing play action to Derrick Henry and then throwing to A.J. Brown. How hard can it possibly be?
Right.
And I also, their general manager now comes from the Chiefs, so perhaps they'll be a little bit smarter. But
they just get $80 million to Dan Moore. I don't think that was the best decision in the world.
Well, you got to have a left tackle, but yeah, I don't have a lot of faith in the Tennessee Titans, and I think the L'Jarius Sneed move, the Chiefs got the better than that one and having that extra. It's almost an extra second round pick, right? Because of where it falls. Actually,
I believe it's the second pick in the third round, and I think we're the 31st in the second round. So I think it's just we're just like 2 or 3 picks separating them.
Back to back there. Well, since we're talking about Browns who play receiver, number 5, Hollywood Brown is back. Pretty team-friendly deal. Can the Chiefs count on Marquise Brown staying healthy?
Probably not.
Ooh.
I think people that get injured.
Just be honest with us there, Dad.
I think people that get injured are injury prone. You know, he had the benefit of playing at Oklahoma with C.D. Lamb, and I think that helped him a lot. Then he went to the Ravens, and I think he had one season where he had 1,000 yards. He wanted to be traded to Arizona to be with his college roommate and friend, and that really never developed in Arizona. So he comes to Kansas City on the first play of preseason. He tears his acromioclavicular joint, and for the listeners out there, that's a ligament, and ligaments generally don't heal as fast as bones. It's just a different entity. And I think he was he said he was working out, but you're always a little hesitant when as someone who broke both his collarbones, I know it's a difficult injury to work around.
Acromioclavicular. Did I say that right?
Acromioclavicular. Yeah, it's the joint right here.
You can rattle that off, but you can't say Kingsley Subaria. I mean, no, you have all these complex medical jargon. The thing with Hollywood Brown is there was always a discount sticker on a guy with that kind of speed and that kind of explosiveness. Even though he's small, because of he's had a litany of injuries. And surprisingly, I thought it was going to be a lower body injury. And when we talk about injuries, you're the doctor, you know more than I do. But it seems like with this position in particular, when lower body injuries keep stacking up, that robs these guys of their juice. Look at DeAndre Hopkins. He wasn't the same. He had flashes in Kansas City, but it looks like all those knee injuries took their toll.
Tyreek had the same injury, Adam, when he played against the Jaguars.
Right.
And he separated. I think he only had a second degree, not a third degree. A third degree is complete separation of the joint, and that's really hard to repair. But you look at Tyreek. Tyreek has missed a lot of games this year, besides parking and driving into, speeding into Miami Stadium. But Tyreek has had a lot of injuries, and he's missed quite a few games. So I think, these fast little guys get hurt.
They're built a little differently, in fairness. One is a beanpole, one is a fire hydrant. But I hear you. I hear you that football is a violent game, and neither of them are very big when you compare them to the rest of the roster. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Touchdown, Kansas City.
Number 6, can running back Elijah Mitchell. He comes, another guy from the 49ers, inject the Chiefs running game with some much needed juice.
Well, I must preface that by saying we are to the 49ers what the Chiefs are to the Saints, starting with Joe Montana, Elvis Grbac. We could go on.
Don't forget Steve Bono and Alex Smith and Jared McKinnon.
Yeah, Jared McKinnon. Anyway, Elijah Mitchell really only carried the ball 75 times last year. He's from the University of Louisiana Lafayette, where he was a 6th-round pick in 2021. He had a really good year 2 or 3 years ago. But like all speed demons, he's had a lot of injuries. And if you remember, we had the same thing with some of our running backs. They get hurt very easily. So I think he's worth a shot. We certainly need to draft at least 1 or 2 running backs now that the cupboard is not completely full. I really don't think that as much as I like Kareem Hunt, I don't think he can play a full season at running back without getting hurt again. And he doesn't give you the speed dimension. We really need speed to open up our flanks and our if you look what happened in Detroit when they got the kid out of Alabama, he really opened up the Detroit Lions offense.
You make a
People laughed. People laughed about taking him on the first round at number 12, but Jahmyr Gibbs. Pardon me?
Jahmyr Gibbs.
Jahmyr Gibbs really has opened up the offense up in Detroit.
Well, if you look at yards per attempt, which means the average depth of a quarterback throw, the top teams are like Detroit, San Francisco, Baltimore, Philly, Green Bay. They all have great running backs, right? So the league is cyclical, and the pendulum has swung from running backs don't matter to defenses are overcommitting to eliminate explosive plays to such a degree that running backs matter again. And Vic Fangio had no respect for the Chiefs running game in the Super Bowl. The confounding thing about Isaiah Pacheco is you put him on a track, he's a speed demon. He had a faster 40 time than Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker in his draft class. He was the best size adjusted athlete in his draft class. But you get him on a football field and a 20-yard run, 15-yard run feels like a miracle because he just doesn't have the vision, the feel, the patience. And the other 3 guys were plotting. Elijah Mitchell, if he can stay healthy. This reminds me of Jerick McKinnon. Jerick McKinnon went to San Francisco, could not stay on the damn field, but his athleticism was off the charts. It's just such a small bet. I mean, it's up to $3 million. What do they have to lose? They should keep drafting running backs, though.
Kansas City.
They should keep drafting running backs. And guys, I think they probably will draft a running back. This is such a good class. Maybe one of the best running back classes we've seen in 20 years. Dad, do you have a favorite in this class? You watch some college football.
I really like the kid out of Iowa.
Caleb Johnson?
Caleb Johnson. I like him a lot. He didn't play in the bowl game against Missouri, but he was about the only offensive weapon in a quarterback-poor Iowa Hawkeye offense. And I think I think he can catch passes out of the backfield, and he can run inside and outside. I think Caleb Johnson would be a good pick and might be available in the 3rd round. I wouldn't go up to the first round. I think the guy from Boise State,
Ashton Genty.
Ashton Genty, will be gone. He'll be gone. And I think Hampton out of North Carolina will be gone.
What if he goes to the Raiders, Ashton Genty? Are you worried about that? Or the Broncos?
No, I'm not. I actually want the Raiders to become more competitive. It's a better rivalry when we know that they're going to give us a game.
Yeah, we talked about this. It's a little sad that the mystique of the silver and black has kind of been so zapped, and maybe Pete Carroll and Tom Brady and Chip Kelly and all these guys have the swagger to like get them back to being a good villain. A story like look at Batman and the Joker. A story is only as good as its villain, right?
Pete Carroll is getting all the old coaches that are my age together. It's like getting the old mob back together for one last venture.
It's like I don't know if it's like The Bucket List or Wild Hogs or what are those movies? Okay, number 7. Is second-year safety Justin Hicks ready to assume a full-time role? What do you think?
I thought he showed flashes of brilliance at times, and yeah, I think he is. You have to make a commitment to younger players, or your roster will get old. I was thinking during the season that we were getting pretty long in the tooth, and as much as I like Toney, as much as I liked Reed, their upside is limited, and particularly they're not looking to win. They're looking to get an extension and more money. And I think that was true of both of them.
Well, go ahead.
And I was glad to see Turt Warshawn. Now, this is off the topic, but I was glad to see him finally be rewarded. Here's a guy from Missouri, S&T, finally gets over his injury, played very well for us at D-tackle, and Carolina certainly needs a D-tackle. And I think that probably will lead us to pick a D-tackle in the first round in the D-tackle draft.
Oh,
I'm off the subject, but
no, we'll get to that. That's a good preview of what we'll get to here in just a second. In terms of Justin Hicks, the Chiefs have kept their secondary so inexpensive that I kind of thought they might sign a safety, because they did that when Eric Berry left. They brought in Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger. Then when the Honey Badger left, they brought in Justin Reed. But if you think back to those teams, the defense and the culture, the defensive culture and the leadership of Steve Spagnuolo and Nick Bolton weren't as solidified. So now I think the Chiefs are getting back to, we want to have one of the cheapest secondaries in the league, because that way we can pay for other things. Now they'll have to pay Trent McDuffie, but when you got Justin Hicks on this rookie contract, and he was a 4th rounder, so you only have him for 4 years on that kind of budget value. You want to get him out there. You want to get him out there and let him sink or swim. He just couldn't do that with Justin Reed on the roster when they had Shamari Connor, when they had Brian Cook. But there were a lot of people that thought Justin Hicks had no business slipping that far. And we have to trust Dave Merritt and Steve Spagnuolo, because don't you think the secondary for the Chiefs has about as good of a positional track record as any group over the last, 6-7 years?
Yes, I do. And I trust Dave Merritt. I think I was very, very, very happy he didn't go with his son to Nebraska. His son was recruited out of high school to play at Nebraska next year. And there was talk that he was going to go with him to be at Nebraska. One point I want to bring out, the Super Bowl. The Eagles had 2 rookie corners and a young defensive backfield, yet they looked unpenetrable. Why? Because they had 4 monsters on their D-line. A great defensive line makes the secondary look accomplished.
Touchdown, Kansas City.
What a transition. Number 8, how worried should we be about defensive line depth? Quick recap. Right now, it's basically just Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, Mike Dana, and FAU. Dad, are you concerned?
Whenever time you say FAU, it makes me my stomach need some Pepto-Bismol or some Pepsi.
FIU gives you IBD?
King Felix. Seriously, it's time for us to spend some money and time to get another D tackle next to Chris. Look, Look at the two that we have that are right now. We have I'm blocking on his name. Help me, Adam.
Naughty and Pinell?
Derek Naughty. He was a third round pick from Florida State when you were in third grade.
He's only like 28 or 29. It feels like he's 36, but he's just been in Kansas City for a long time.
And how many years can we run your favorite Chief player out at D tackle?
Mike Pinell?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Playoff Warren Sapp. The guy. Playoff. He wasn't as good in the playoffs this year. I have to.
He's getting long in the tooth, Adam.
He is. He's like 32, 33. I think this is going to be a draft where the Chiefs just hammer defensive line because they've got good depth in this draft at defensive line. It's a little scary. I'm not saying Veach hasn't made some good picks at defensive line. Of course, Chris Jones, John Dorsey pick. George Karlaftis, good pick. I think smart. He was the best player available. Mike Dana really has overachieved and been a great selection. I think he was a 5th rounder. But you have picks sprinkled in there like Kando, like FAU, like Breland Speaks. I know that name just gives people PTSD even mentioning it. So
I think
do you trust
him? Will be resigned.
Oh, you do?
I do. And the reason for that is they've got to have some depth. FAU is entering his 3rd year. And as your brother always says, oh, Dad, you got to give D lineman 3 years to progress. Well, if he makes one play a game and then he disappears, and you got to pay more than one play a game. And you would agree with me on that as a former defensive end yourself.
Yeah, I played everywhere, safety, linebacker, but you can't just have, sometimes these guys that have splash plays, Devin White is an example I use a lot for the Buccaneers because he played against the Chiefs in Super Bowl 55 and last year. He's a guy that looks like Tarzan 2 plays a game and looks like Jane the other 58. So, but in FAU's defense, in Felix's defense, he doesn't get out there enough really to get consistent reps. I think that maybe with more playing time, you might see more flashes, but the ceiling has certainly been lowered on what his potential is at this point.
Here's what I would say about FAU. He was a 2-star coming out of Oak Park High School.
Go ahead.
He was a 2-star out of Oak Park High School in Kansas City. He wanted to go to Mizzou. Mizzou wasn't interested. He was a developmental project at K-State, and they have a great developmental program. And he overachieved on a very good defense, and everybody thought, and he really looked good, but he's still a 2-star athlete, just like Nick Bolton was a 2-star athlete, but he made himself into a better player by really working on studying film and developing himself. I give FAU another year, but I think King Felix is not going to be a 5-year veteran.
Yeah. The thing to remember about these first-round picks is where the Chiefs select during the Mahomes era, it's always been the bottom 4 of the first round. Those aren't really first-round picks, guys. You're generally not getting blue chip players there, or even quasi blue chips like George Karlaftis. And that's why I think the Chiefs have been trading up to get guys like Xavier Worthy and Trent McDuffie, because if they see a guy that is a legitimate top 15 player on their board within striking range, they're going to go up and get them. Dad, I should have known 3 minutes. We've been getting on the phone and talking Chiefs for decades, for hours. I should have known that we would have no respect for the countdown of Tron. Number 9, I'm dying to hear your thoughts on this one. It's a polarizing topic. Should the Chiefs consider signing wide receiver Cooper Kupp, who the Rams just released?
No.
Okay.
The biggest problem we have with our receivers last year, part of it was the offensive line, part of it was Mahomes getting frustrated, but our wide receivers weren't getting separation. And it's hard to throw to people that are covered. Why did he go to Xavier Worthy? Because he got separation.
Mm-hmm.
Why did we have trouble with the other wide receivers? Why was Rashid Weiss so good? because he's got a quick start. He accelerates very fast. He catches the ball well, and yards after catch, he is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say that about the rest of them. That's why they signed Hollywood Brown, because he does have speed and can get separation. DeAndre Hopkins, no separation. He made great catches. If you go back and look at the films, like the one on the sideline, he had two guys on him. I don't know how he caught it. He didn't have separation. I don't know how Mahomes threw the ball to him.
That drop in the Super Bowl, because I thought DeAndre Hopkins, there's an argument that he has some of the best hands in NFL history. For him to drop that pass, that's when I knew, like, okay, everything you can imagine is going to go wrong today. I'm going to play devil's advocate here, because Juju Smith-Schuster came in here 3 years ago and people thought he was shot. But the Chiefs have this really lucrative power slot role where they stick a certain kind of player in that's big, that's smart, that can run a certain kind of routes and rack up yak. And this is what Cooper Kupp did in Los Angeles for the Rams. He was kind of the originator of this sort of power slot boom we've seen with Chris Godwin and Amon-Ra St. Brown and our own Rashee Rice. Now, Rashee Rice is coming off of surgery. I want to hear your thoughts as a physician on that. But he also has a suspension. So if you want another guy, if you want some insurance, like, couldn't they stick him into that Juju role and milk even 75% of what's left of Cooper Kupp for all it's worth and get a decent return?
Well, certainly I wouldn't trade any assets for him.
Well, he's been released.
Okay,
So.
But finances are assets too. If this guy wants $7 or $8 million, absolutely not. I might try to sign him for just over the league minimum and see if he would take it. I don't know.
I don't think he's going to take that, given that Tutu Atwell just made $10 million. But if he wants to chase another ring, Kansas City is a great place to do that. We'll see. We'll see.
Touchdown, Kansas City.
I think he's out of Brett Veach's price range. And let's close up with the man himself, Brett Veach. He seems to be leaning into betting on youth and smaller short-term contracts. We talked about that earlier, but I just want to put a bow in this conversation. Do you agree with the current vision that this front office has?
I think they've done an exceptional job being competitive. We've gone to 7 straight AFC championships. This is after 50 years of futility. And we're drafting late, either 29, 30, 31, 32. And we're giving away some, quite often, we've had to get rid of our expensive stars. They're overpriced, like Tyreek, like Toney. It goes on and on. And
L'Jarius Sneed,
L'Jarius Sneed is another one. You just can't keep everybody. And I think it'll be I think Veach, I think he's in the top 3 general managers. I think you got to look to Philadelphia's general manager. I think he's probably the best right now. He robbed New Orleans of their first round pick a couple years ago, and he's always looking for a trade. And I think he's pretty intuitive.
He is. I think he's probably the best general manager in the league. But what I will throw out there that doesn't get mentioned enough is Jeffrey Lurie, the owner of the Eagles, empowers him in a way that no other GM in the National Football League is empowered. Brett Veach, I think Clark Hunt is a good owner in a lot of ways. He hires the right people. He trusts them. He's invested enough, but keeps his ego out of it, unlike, say, Jerry Jones and several other owners. But he's just not as willing to get aggressive spending wise and working around the salary cap. So comparing Brett Veach to Howie Roseman always needs that caveat. One thing that I think is interesting when you look at Mike Berzoni, is that his name? The guy in Tennessee, Ryan Poles now in Chicago. There's been a little bit of brain drain for this front office. And I wonder if that's going to take its toll, or if some fresh ideas actually helps out, because kind of pivoting here.
You got to give his people talk about the coaching tree. People talk about athletic directors tree. I think Brett Veach is developing a tree. He's developing guys that have worked under him and gone on for success. One thing you mentioned, and I want to talk about this, Rashid Rice had a posterior, everybody talks about anterior cruciate. He had a posterior cruciate tear. It's a little different. If you all remember back, Kelly Thames, who played for Missouri, tore his posterior cruciate, and he was really never the player he was before. And it really depends on whether he had any other structural damage, how big his anterior cruciate is. The two cruciates work on stability of the knee. And we'll just have to see. I would be very, very careful with him. I do think, like you mentioned, he will get at least a 4-game suspension. And by the way, one other thing I want to mention, Adam, you talked about Joe Toney as the best free agent signing. I think the best was Harrison Butker. You've got a Hall of Fame kicker there.
Okay.
He's going to be dependable another 5 to 10 years.
They have made some good signings. You got him in the mix. Tyrann Mathieu, certainly a Bob Sutton defense that looked like one of the worst units I've ever seen. He brought championship swagger, completely changed the culture, and helped them become a defense good enough to win a title. Mitchell Schwartz was arguably the best tackle and the right tackle in the league before Lane Johnson kind of inherited that crown. One thing I was mentioning before is new blood in the front office. The offensive coaching tree for the Chiefs, kind of side tangent here, I think has become stagnant, Dad. I think it's all Andy Reid, yes men, West Coast offense guys. They need to bring in somebody. I'm not saying fire Matt Nagy, but they need a special assistant or somebody that has no ties to Andy Reid's tree and no ties to the West Coast offense. Just Abraham Lincoln, right? Team of rivals. Let's throw some new ideas in the mix. It just did it not look stale last year more than ever?
I think I thought the games were boring compared to 7 years ago. We need more breakaway speed, and we need a running back that can get outside. You know, the DNs were cheating in the Super Bowl. They knew that they didn't have to respect a screen pass or a jet sweep or one of our running backs getting wide on them. And I know you all like Pacheco, but he really can't run outside very well. He is tackle to tackle running back, and so is Kareem Hunt. And I think we definitely need one or two guys. We got Elijah Mitchell. Try to get a rookie to fill that role.
I'm worried about Isaiah Pacheco. I know everyone said, well, he was hurt last year and he battled through it, and that was courageous, and we should commend him for that. Absolutely. But these guys, these running backs that run like him and run into contact, Christian Okoye, Larry Johnson, Jamal Anderson, Marion Barber, Ahmad Bradshaw, these guys, I'm just rattling off names, but they don't last very long. They don't last, like some of these guys like Aaron Jones that are a little bit more tactical with the way they run and a little bit more explosive. Do you think we've seen, kind of bonus question here, do you think we've seen the best of Isaiah Pacheco already?
Yes, I do. He has taken tremendous beating the last several years. He took a beating when he played for Rutgers. I happen to know one of his linemen that played with him, and he said that he played the same way that he played here, not outside, between the tackles. And in the Big Ten or the SEC, you take a physical beating as a running back, and there's no question about that.
He's fun to watch. He's tough as hell. You got to respect that. But I just think at the end of the day, he's a 7th rounder who overachieved, but trying to expect him to be an all-purpose back with where the NFL is shifting when we're up against Saquon Barkley and Jahmyr Gibbs and Josh Jacobs and Derrick Henry and all these guys, it's just not going to cut it. It's just not going to cut it. Okay, guys.
I think it was interesting that Samaje got picked up by the Bengals. I thought Andy did not use him enough, and he must have some gas left in the tank because they picked him up right
Well,
away.
he's the familiar face, but I thought they were going to use him as like a different version of Jerick McKinnon, and he just wasn't on the field as much. So I don't know I don't know what that was all about. But guys, real quick here, we're going to do a lightning round where we're going to answer your questions. If you have any questions for me and the old man, it's been super fun having you on the show, Dad. I mean,
It's been fun.
You really, if I'm the blog father, I mean, you're the father of the blog father. Arrowhead Addict would not be anything. Patrick, me, Verram, Connor, none of us would be here if you didn't give Zach and I what we used to think was a disease, but now we've inherited this great gift of being Chiefs fans, which I'm so thankful for. Let's see if we have any questions here from the chat. None so far. Pacheco has no vision to make cuts from Gary.
I would agree with that, Gary.
Piron, a Bengal spy. I don't know about that. I just think he was cheap. He's comfortable in their system. He's been good in their system. They probably just need another body with Chase Brown. I think Zach Moss is still under contract.
I'm not worried about the Bengals. They're a team. Their ownership is in disarray. I mean, when you can't sign all-pro wide receivers and a quarterback and an all-pro DN, it's kind of sad. You need to figure things out.
Oh, they just don't have the money. Here's a question from Jesus. Who do you draft at 31? Dad, you and I have talked about this. I'm going to let you have the floor. What do you think? What do they do at 31?
This draft, and I've studied it extensively, is deep in D tackles, DNs, and running backs. There's only 2 quarterbacks, really, although I think Dart may slip into the first round. I'm not suggesting the Chiefs draft a quarterback. I would go for a D tackle or a DN. I would not address the offensive tackle this early. We really need to address the D tackle room, particularly when they let Tershawn leave. That was a big loss. And I really don't want Derek Nottie starting any more games for the Chiefs. I'm sorry. I think he's done.
We salute you for your service, my man, but I think it's time for both of us to move on. And Gary follows up here. What position do you think the Chiefs will draft first? I'm in agreement with you. I think this is – I know some people think it's arbitrary, the arm length thing, but the Chiefs, especially Jalen Moore's arm length is not quite 34 inches, but they've seen him function in the pros. When you're projecting guys from college to the pros and they don't have the arm length you like, it's just more of a gamble because you don't know if they're going to be able to handle professional edges. So I don't know if they're going to go for a tackle. I think they might try to find another guy in the second or third. I think they're yeah.
They talked about. I noticed one of the gentlemen mentioned about Jesse Simmons, the offensive tackle from
Josh
Simmons, right, who tore his patellar tendon. The patellar tendon is a very hard one to heal. If you all remember, and I try to give you other athletes that have injured a similar injury so you all can write. Dennis Leonard, who was a great pitcher for the Royals, tore his patellar tendon. And again, that's a pitcher who comes down on that tendon. The patellar tendon is a tendon that goes around the patella, the kneecap, and attaches to the front of the tibia, which is the main bone of the lower extremity. And when that tendon is torn, you lose a lot of power and push. And, that is really something you need at offensive tackle. I think he's going to drop in the draft because of that injury. I really do. The other thing, he only played at Ohio State 1 year. I believe he played, I'm trying to remember where he played. He played at a small school before he played there. My memory is slipping, as you might anticipate, but he only played at Ohio State 1 year, and he tore his interpatellar tendon.
Got a question from Daniel here. I think he's asking about Beke Ibuka. think that's how you pronounce his name, or Mason Taylor. Do we take them? I got to be honest with you, Daniel. I am really just starting my heavy draft prep now, and Sterling and I, and particularly on this show, but I think Price and some of the other guys have already dig in. We're going to be almost nothing but draft coverage over the next few months. So I'm going to have some stronger takes on prospects. I have some strong takes about running backs. I really like both my dad and I like Caleb Johnson a lot. But I'll take a look at those guys. Let's see. Oh, we got to see Angry Drunken German, our guy, been loyal from the start. What's the dumbest thing the Best Brothers ever did? I'm not going to let you answer that about Zach. He's not here to defend himself. What was the dumbest thing I ever did as a little kid?
I took him to a Chiefs game. It was cold. I got him a hot dog, and he dropped it. He wanted a new hot dog. I said, I'm going to wash it off. He refused to eat it.
But you did. You took it to the bathroom, washed it off, and I thought I ate it. You took it to the.
Didn't. You've always been a picky eater.
Well.
And the funniest thing Zach ever did, he would say, Derek, get that Elway, get him.
Yeah, I mean,
Zach did not like Elway at all.
Yeah, I mean, those were our formative Chiefs years, getting haunted by John Elway. And I know a lot of Chiefs fans have the same experience. That's why you hear from a lot of Chiefs fans, older Chiefs fans especially, that the Raiders are the Chiefs' biggest rival. But I think if you really grew up during the Elway years and were kind of tortured by Shanahan and Elway over and over and over again, and you eventually saw them win titles in the 90s, I've just never really – I guess I did get over it, but it took me the Chiefs beating them like 15 times in a row for me to say, okay, we're even now. We're even. And you still don't feel like we're even. You hate the Broncos.
No, I hate the Broncos. I've said I wanted to beat them every time they played till the day I die. But the other team that really has become our rival, I think, is the Buffalo Bills. And I think they've been our rival for a long time. They kept us out of the Super Bowl with Joe Montana. Of course, you were born on the day that we beat the Bills. But, they Levy as their coach. I think there's some similarities. They're from small market teams. It's I think they're our rival. Right now, I think they're a bit better rival than, and particularly with Josh Allen versus Mahomes. That's a classic rivalry right there.
It's the new Brady Manning, right?
Yeah.
And I think that Patrick is looking like Tom right now with the better coach and the more success. But Peyton Manning did not win a Super Bowl until like his 8th year or something. So my question for you, and then we have a few more questions from people in a super chat to get to, and then we'll get out of here. My question for you is, will Josh Allen ever win a Lombardi?
Yes.
One? Plural? What do you think?
I think it's hard to speculate. Their ownership has made a commitment. They're building a new stadium. I noticed they just signed Bosa today to $12 million, although this is the least talented of the two, Bosa, and one that's injury prone. As I talked about before, injury prone is a real – doctors really believe there are people that are injury prone. I was that way when I played in high school. I got hurt almost every season. You were hurt a lot.
I had to quit college football because I couldn't stay on the field. I mean, I'm still injury prone, so I get it. And I think Joey Bosa had a Hall of Fame talent, and he just hasn't been able to see that through because he can't stay on the field. It's not a huge bet, but it seems a little bit like a smaller version of Von Miller all over again. I see someone like Zadarius Smith out there who I thought was awesome for the Lions last year, and I want the Chiefs to sign him. I would be upset if the Chiefs signed Joey Bosa. Eve Newman, I think that's how you pronounce your name. If not, apologies. What the F is Brett Veach doing? The Chiefs are so effing cheap. It's ridiculous. Every free agency season, we do nothing significant. Who have they signed that will make a difference? I will preface this with saying I think this is a disastrously bad free agency class. And I also don't think Super Bowls are won in March. The Tennessee Titans spent more money than anybody last year. And what did they get for it? They got the number 2 pick, right? So
No, the number 1 pick.
The number 1 pick. Sorry. Cleveland got the number 2. I think that because this is a bad class, they are taking smaller bets because they just don't want to throw money around. They want to keep avenues open for trades for next year in free agency.
Here's another point, Adam.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I got to bring this up. Cap is expanded every year except for 1 year when we had COVID. What's to stop us having regressive cap or a cap that's plateaus? And then you've got a lot of people that are going to have to be cut or traded. And that really breaks up your team. So I don't think you want to overpay.
Yeah, you don't. And there have certainly been some overpays that have made me that Javon Kinlaw contract that the Commanders handed out. And even, hey, I'm with you, Turk Wharton. I'm glad he got the bag. I'm glad he got paid. I'm proud of him. It's good to see our guys get rewarded. But I'm thinking, man, $50 million for Turk Wharton? A guy, he was playing next to Chris Jones. And when guys play next to a Chris Jones or Aaron Donald, they tend to rack up sacks. So good for him, good for those guys. But teams are throwing money around right now like a drunk at 1:30 a.m. at the bar. You don't want to be that
money.
You don't want to be that team. We've got a super chat before we get out here from Slammin' Sam. Thank you so much. I'm excited to go over draft prospects with y'all. We're very excited too. I'm not a huge college football guy. I watch some bowl games and the playoffs. I like to come at this with fresh eyes, but it's just a real obsession from now until what is it? About we got 8 weeks, less than that, more than that, 10 weeks.
Adam, I'm a draftnik, you know that, and I'm a big college football fan.
You are, and we're going to have you back. You did a great job. This is a lot of fun. Something I've been wanting to do for a long time. Thanks, Dad, for coming on. Guys, that's all we've got. Thanks to the chat. You guys always bring it. If you dig Arrowhead Addict, here's how you can help our community grow. Subscribe right here on YouTube. That way you never miss a show. You never miss a short. We're doing all kinds of things. Last year, we did the top 50 Chiefs of all time. We're probably going to do something like that again this offseason. If you're an audio listener on Spotify or Apple, please consider leaving us a 5-star review. That will really help me out, Sterling help out the rest of the crew. And if you ask a question along with that review on Apple, either myself and Patrick Allen or Patrick Allen and Matt Verderam will answer that on Thursday's OG Hour. Lastly, check out the mothership, arrowheadaddict.com. Matt, Connor, and the gang are going to be pumping out free agency takes, draft takes, just getting you prepped and keeping you in the know for the entire offseason. That's what we've got for you guys. Join us live next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Central here on the Arrowhead Addict channel. I won't be here. Sterling will be here next week with someone else. We're kind of trading places. Until I see you guys next time, go Chiefs.